Thank you very much for being here. This is a very, I think this is a very important, if kind of underground movement to push for, and it's kind of a underground movement against Muslims, masked as a movement against foreign and international law, and it is something that we hope will generate a lot of interest and concern in the future. And I think one of the things that Judge Henry said that I would like to elaborate upon is this whole idea of, you know, foreign law bans being couched as bans against foreign and international law, but are fundamentally motivated by the crusade against the Islamic faith. And ultimately, how this came about really was because the Oklahoma Court of Appeals outlawed the Sharia bans and basically said it's unconstitutional for you to explicitly target a particular religion. So all these anti-Sharia activists basically decided that they had to come up with a second iteration of the ban, and these are the foreign law bans we see today. And so just not long ago, I think they are still being justified on the basis of being, they are still being justified on the basis that we need to protect the Sharia. From the great state of Florida, a state senator called Ellen Hayes basically called Sharia a dreadful disease, quote unquote, and something that should be vaccinated against. And the vaccination was foreign law ban. And I think David Barkey from the ADL will talk about that a bit more. But one of the interesting questions at the start of the report writing process, at the start of research, was I asked Faiza, what does this have to do with national security? How are foreign law bans, you know, what national security consequences or implications do they have? And when we were discussing about this and, like, you know, what the national security perspective on this is, I began to do a little bit of digging on some of the people that have advocated for these bans. Are in many ways the leading architects of these bans. We know from the New York Times expose that David Yerushalmi, a Brooklyn-based attorney, was the one who really drafted this ban and has pushed it out in like 34 states, 7 of which have passed foreign law bans. But there's also another key figure in this movement, and I think he really, the story behind him, and his name is Frank Gaffney, his story really illustrates how foreign law bans are really linked to this movement that has a lot of adverse national security consequences if the anti-Muslim movement is allowed to progress even further than they already have. So let me tell you the story about Frank Gaffney. So Frank Gaffney is the president of a group known as the Center for Security Policy, and they have been one of the leading advocates of anti-Sharia and anti-Muslim sentiment, and they basically house, David Yerushalmi is general counsel to this group. But this group also was hired by the Department of Justice in 2010 to educate local, state, and federal cops about how to deal with the Muslim community. And so this was part of a larger scandal in 2011 when a series of news reports basically revealed that the FBI and local law enforcement agencies had been hiring anti-Muslim activists like Gaffney to teach terrorism readiness and prevention courses. And so there were like 4 or 5 prongs of these anti-terror courses. One was many Muslim Americans have terrorist ties. Second, major Muslim civil liberties organizations such as the Council on American and Islamic Relations are actually a front for the Muslim Brotherhood. Third, Muslims are planning to wage violent jihad on all Americans. And one of the interesting things that came out of all these news is that Muslims seek to replace the US Constitution with Islamic and Sharia law. So you see how foreign law bans quickly, you know, are actually part of this movement to inculcate even our law enforcement and intelligence communities that these are people you are to be afraid of. You know, these are people that you are supposed to kind of spy on, for example. And one last tidbit about Frank Gaffney before I move on is that he sits, and this has implications in New York, is that he sits on the advisory board of the Clarion Project, an organization that has advocated for foreign law bans, and they were the ones that also paid for the production of the film called The Third Jihad, which was shown to more than 1,000 NYPD officers as part of their counterterrorism training. And the film basically posits that Muslims are at war with America. So given that the people who are behind the anti-Sharia movement and the anti-foreign law movement in great part are the principal generators of fear and mistrust about Muslims, and the fact that they have also, to use their favorite phrase, infiltrated the upper reaches of the national security industry, I think it's not surprising why we have seen all these explosive reports and revelations about the NYPD and the FBI engaging in invasive religious profiling when conducting surveillance and counterterrorism operations. So advocating against foreign law bans, which is what all of us on this panel believe in, I'm sure a lot of you do as well, is also advocating against fundamentally flawed biases that inform our national security policies till this day, and so I think that kind of ties in why foreign law bans are so important, such an important tool for a lot of anti-Muslim supporters, and how they have fundamentally changed our national security.